Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's episode, I want to talk about Tour of Flanders that's coming up on Sunday. There's no doubt about it because we just got done watching Dwars-Door-Vlaanderen and before that, Ghent-Wevelgem. So what do we take out of Ghent-Wevelgem and Dwars-Door-Vlaanderen that can possibly help some of the competition compete against Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel when we get to Tour of Flanders? Okay, first off, let me be 100% clear. When we're talking Alpecin de Koenig with Mathieu van der Poel and UAE Team Emirates with Tadej Pogačar, if these two teams come in with a strong enough support for both Mathieu and Tadej Pogačar, they can't be beat. It's that simple. If you come in with an exceptional team, there is no way of beating two riders of this quality. It just can't happen. But it can happen if there's some mistakes made. It can happen if UAE team members Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel start hesitating. Remember, Tadej Pogačar is not a sprinter. He knows Mathieu van der Poel can drop him in the sprint and win Tour of Flanders. So Tadej Pogačar has to get rid of Mathieu van der Poel. Mathieu van der Poel knows most likely that he does not have the same type of legs as Tadej Pogačar, although maybe he thinks he does. He won Milan-San Remo, and he was able to follow Tadej Pogačar up the Cipressa and the Poggio. But if I bring you into Milan-San Remo, I'll highlight exactly what I just got done explaining, is that we saw hesitation up the Cipressa from Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel, and that's what kept allowing Filippo Ganna to get back on. Even when you fast forward all the way into the Poggio, when Tadej Pogačar was attacking left, right, and center, all the way up the climb, and Mathieu van der Poel was locked onto his wheel, even threw in his own acceleration at 500 meters to go to the top of the Poggio, which Tadej Pogačar brought back. The main reason Filippo Ganna got back on, it wasn't because Filippo Ganna caught these guys. These guys eased up, and Filippo Ganna was on amazing form and was able to catch once we got into 700 meters to go. So that is the key race, Milan-San Remo, when you fast forward and we start talking about Tour of Flanders. If there's some hesitation between Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel not wanting to work well together, and there should be hesitation. Once we get through the Old de Quermont for the last time and up to Paterberg, the last and final climb of Tour of Flanders in 2025, if Tadej Pogačar is not solo and he's with Mathieu van der Poel, Tadej Pogačar's tactics should absolutely be to sit on Mathieu van der Poel, bring it back to whoever's chasing back there, and then have multiple numbers so Tadej Pogačar can hope there's attacks happening left, right, and center from a group of 10 riders. He doesn't even want just one rider coming back on. He wants a group of 5, 6, 7, 8 riders coming back on. So now it can turn into some kind of tactical game where everybody, of course, is watching Mathieu van der Poel, the big 3-star favorite at Tour of Flanders. Now, Tadej Pogačar will be watched too, but Tadej Pogačar might have a chance of going up the road with someone with less speed than Mathieu van der Poel at the end of Tour of Flanders. So that's why there could be a chance for riders. I'm saying there's a chance. It's a small one, but there is a chance that someone other than Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel wins Tour of Flanders if Tadej Pogačar races it correctly and cannot get rid of one Mathieu van der Poel once we get over the Paterberg. Now, how does that happen? How can we make it more and more difficult if you are one of the teams that are not UAE Team Emirates or Alpecin de Koenig? Well, first off, we look at the profile. It's 270 kilometers. If there's massive crosswinds like we have seen at Dwars-Door-Vlaanderen and Ghent-Wevelgem, it's going to become even more complicated for the smaller teams because Alpecin de Koenig will have their team lined up at the front of the peloton along with UAE Team Emirates in the crosswind, looking after Tadej Pogačar and looking after Mathieu van der Poel. But what happens to teams like Lidl Trek? What happens to teams like Intermarché? What happens to teams like EF Education and FDJ? Well, those teams are going to have to do the same thing for their riders, which means that their super domestiques or domestiques, because well, they don't really have super domestiques over there, so their domestiques are going to get more tired. So if you're one of the teams not named UAE Team Emirates or Alpecin de Koenig, you don't want crosswinds. You want the race to be as easy as you possibly can make it on your team. So if there's no crosswinds in the first 130 kilometers of the flat course here of Tour of Flanders, that helps the smaller teams because now you can start to get away in the break. Now, it's very important that when you're in the break, everybody works well together. this first 130 kilometers of the flat section of Tour of Flanders is vital, because if there's no crosswind and Tadej Pogačar has to ride his team on the front along with Alpecin de Koenig, you get a better draft. So Mads Pedersen, who has Alex Kirsch, who has Jasper Stuyvens with him, and every one of his other domestiques get a better draft if it's just a complete headwind. A complete headwind will make it harder on UAE Team Emirates and Alpecin de Koenig, because everyone directly advantage behind those wheels of those two teams gets a bigger advantage if it's a direct headwind. If it's a crosswind, ooh, everybody's in trouble. We saw that at Paris-Roubaix last year when Alpecin de Koenig lit it up throughout the early parts of Paris-Roubaix in the crosswind sections, always placing Mathieu van der Poel in good position. Then by the time he lit everyone up at Paris-Roubaix, nobody had any super domestiques to help them to do any work for second-tier star riders, and Mathieu van der Poel soloed at Paris-Roubaix. So these teams do not want to wake up to crosswinds, that is for sure. So with that in mind, again, we go back into the race, and let's talk about what the break does not want to do. Okay, now we're talking about a break of, we'll say, 10 riders are going up the road. We saw something like that against Wevelgem when we saw my man Victor Campenaerts when he makes it into the break, and then we start getting into the Kimmelberg with 87 kilometers to go. This group of about 8 riders at this moment in time, they still got a gap on the peloton back there of the GC favorites. But once we get into the Kimmelberg, we see the EF Education rider. That's Max Walker. Max Walker's throwing down on the Kimmelberg and blowing up the break. You do not want to blow up the break when you get into Tour of Flanders. Okay, Max Walker, I don't know if you're doing Tour of Flanders. I haven't even looked to see if you're on that list, but I'll put it down below if you are. But if you're in the race and you're riding like Max Walker did on the Kimmelberg, this is a mistake. Why is it a mistake? You do not want to press on the pedals at maximum effort when the climb is going up. You want to press on the pedals hard on the flats. You want to press hard on the descents. You do not want to press hard on the climb like we saw Max Walker do and Gent Wevelgem. He blew the brake up. You do not want to blow the brake up. You want to keep the brake together, and you want to gain time on the flats, and you want to gain time on the descents. You do not want to gain time on the climbs, because in order to gain time on the climbs, that means you have to blow up the brake, which means you have to have less numbers. The only time you want to blow up the brake is when you want to have less numbers in the brake, but that means you have less power after the climb. You want to go steady everywhere throughout the race, and on the climb especially is when you want to back off a percentage so that 100% of the riders in the brake that are working in the brake, not guys sitting on the brake, but 100% of the guys who are working in the brake that are keeping the brake going fast on the flats and the descents, this will allow them to actually get up and over the climb, and you never want to be in the red. Never be in the red. At a 270 kilometer race, and you got to have pressure on Alpecin de Koenig and UAE Team Emirates, you do not want to be in the red. You want to get in the brake, and you're going to have to be in the red at that moment. But once you get in the brake, you want to get the brake established, and you want to be riding steady Eddie. Steady Eddie the whole time, and you want the whole group riding steady Eddie. Now, if you start looking at some of the other second-tier teams, like Trek, like Visma Lease Bike. Geez, can you believe I'm saying Visma Lease Bike's a second-tier team at Tour of Flanders? It's almost unthinkable, but at the moment, that is what we're looking at if you're Visma Lease Bike. So if they can get a rider in the break, if FDJ can get a rider in the break that have Stefan Kuhn, who looked like he was on flying form, if we talk about Mads Pedersen's Lidl Trek team can get a rider in the break, those riders have to put a ton of pressure on all the flat sections and all the descents to keep this break as much time as they possibly can, and make UAE Team Emirates and Alpecin de Koenig have to do a ton of work throughout the first 130 kilometers of the race. And then when we get into the mountainous part there of Tour of Flanders, up all of the bergs, the brake has to be very careful on how they use the energy. Do not push on the steepest sections of the climb. You want to roll that stuff. You want to stay steady Eddie over the climb, roll it, and then you want to roll with big power on the flats and descents, because that's when the draft is the biggest. So everyone back there that's sitting on the wheel can recover, come to the front, do their pull, go to the back, recover, do their pull again. Do not do a Max Walker at Gent Wevelgem where he blew the group up trying to be a superstar and then got dropped a few hundred meters later from my man Victor Campenaerts. That was an amateur move. Now, let's go into Visma Lease Bike and Lidl Trek's Mads Pedersen. When we start looking at that team along with FDJ, Stefan Kuhn, if you cannot follow the attack of Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel, and who can't? Who here sitting on the Chesterfield that's viewing this coverage right now from the Butterfly Effect and beyond the coverage would tell me that we expect Mads Pedersen, maybe he can follow, but we don't expect him to follow. Wout van Aert, Jorgensen, maybe Jorgensen can follow, but if we go into last year's Tour of Flanders, he tried to follow, he blew his legs up, it was a mistake. So, if we take that mistake from Jorgensen last year, and Jorgensen has been riding fantastic this year and last year since he joined Visma Lease Bike. His intelligence in riding has been absolutely fantastic when you look at it for his age, but he's missing some of the fine details. This is another one of the fine details he's missing, where at Tour of Flanders, when he could not immediately follow Mathieu van der Poel, he had to shut it down and do what? Okay, all the big guys. Mads Pedersen tried it just yesterday, Dwarsdorf-Vlaanderen. Mads Pedersen tried to follow the move. He was too late to follow it. He had the legs to follow it, but he missed it with 70 kilometers to go, and Visma Lease Bike lit it up. He missed the move. He was spectacular coming back to the front of that climb and then trying to go across, but it was already too late. At that moment, just like Jorgensen last year at Tour of Flanders, they have to understand, if you can make it in that move, if you make the acceleration with Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel, and who here really expects them to make it? I don't expect anyone to make it, but I know it's a possibility. So, if you can't make that move, Jorgensen, Wout van Aert, who I think will get even better, as spectacular of a mess up as yesterday's Dwarsdorf-Vlaanderen loss to Nielsen Palace was, that still shows that Wout van Aert's form has come up since E3 Saxo Bank. So Wout van Aert is looking better when we're talking about Tour of Flanders. Is he going to be on the form of Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel? I don't see that. But is he on the level of Jorgensen? We saw that yesterday, so his level has come up, certainly. When we start looking at Palace, his levels now has to be up there in the ranking order there of Jorgensen and of Wout van Aert. And then the rider that is questionable, Mads Pedersen. Can Mads Pedersen make the split, or is he going to be in this group back here? Well, if he can't make the split, he has to know right away, and that means he has to stay with these guys. Mads, do not get stuck in the middle again like you did on yesterday's Dwarsdorf-Vlaanderen. Yesterday, certainly Mads Pedersen could have just backed off, worked with FDJ, worked with Intermarché, worked with Ineos that was pulling on the front. If Bora Hansgrohe weren't a knucklehead trying to jump across and they put one guy on the front too, certainly they catch that group of the Visma Lease Bike Bs up there along with Nielsen Palace, because they held them already with terrible tactics back there from the peloton and held them for almost 20 kilometers. So now, again, at the Tour of Flanders, these second star favorites, they have to know right away, I can't make it. So let's not blow up my teammates. Let's not blow up my super domestiques. Let's not blow up the guys that can help, like Nielsen Palace, Jorgensen, Mads Pedersen, and Wout van Aert. Let's not blow these guys up all chasing each other like ridiculousness that we saw at yesterday's Dwarsdorf-Vlaanderen. Let's back off the throttle a hair. Let's stay together. Let's keep a couple teammates. So Stuyvens, instead of attacking at Dwarsdorf-Vlaanderen, rides the front for Mads Pedersen. So at Tour of Flanders, Mads Pedersen still has one Alex Kirsch there. He still has one Stuyvens there. He rides these guys 100%. Chasing with everything they got, steady over the climbs, 100% fast everywhere else, because Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel are going to light things up with 80 kilometers to go, maybe 100 kilometers to go, whatever it is. So you ride your super domestiques for the next 20K. You kill them. Then when you're Mads Pedersen, Jorgensen, Palace, Wout van Aert, then you stay together with a Stefan Kuhn and you guys go after all of your super domestiques have blown. Then you guys try to bring back Tadej Pogačar and Mathieu van der Poel and bring back. I don't expect to bring back, but I expect that there could be some games at the front, a.k.a. Milan-San Remo, like we saw with Mathieu van der Poel and Tadej Pogačar, and there's some hesitation, and then the second star favorites could possibly get themselves back in the race, and then we have a spectacular, absolutely amazing finish to Tour of Flanders on Sunday's race if the tactics are spot on and 100%. Now, just before I go, I know it's a long video, but I want to cover something because I've been wanting to cover it in the last 3 videos. Jordi Meeus, the crash at Ghent-Wevelgem. When I look at Eurosport, I was watching Flow Bikes, and it was Declan Quigley there that said Jordi Meeus, with 100 kilometers to go, dive bombed the inside and caused the crash there. Later, we saw the UCI come out and give a yellow card to Jordi Meeus for diving down the inside and causing the crash there. Let's back up the film again and take a look at what really happened. Jordi Meeus never caused this crash. Could he have caused the crash? He might have caused the crash, but the crash had already happened in front of him. If you look closely to the video, which Flow Bikes and Eurosport and Declan Quigley, who called it wrong not once, not twice, not 3 times, but probably 4 or 5 times, and blamed Jordi Meeus for causing this crash. If you look at the crash properly, as any professional commentator should, you look at the front, you see that it's Astana that was coming up the inside on the sidewalk like Jordi Meeus was, but way in front of Jordi Meeus, he comes over on the Bahrain Victorious, who comes over the Bert van Leeuwenberg from Soudal Quickstep, who is crashing at the time that Jordi Meeus is on the sidewalk coming in and then adding to the crash. Jordi Meeus did not cause the crash. The crash was caused up front from the Astana rider and the Total Energy rider that shuffled its way, domino effect, over the Bert van Leeuwenberg, who went down. And then Jordi Meeus added into the crash because of the speed he was having coming up the left side. Okay, the UCI says they're complaining and their yellow card there, Jordi Meeus. I don't know if they're giving him the yellow card for causing the crash, which I just explained to you that he absolutely did not cause the crash, or if they're giving him the yellow card because he was on the sidewalk. But if you want to talk about the sidewalk, let's go into yesterday's Dwars-Door-Vlaanderen with about 77 kilometers to go, which turned into 76, which turned into 75, which turned into 74, when Visma kept adding rider after rider to the front of the peloton. And the last rider to come up on the right side on the sidewalk there is none other than Dylan van Baarle from Visma, who was a crucial member to the yellow team up there, Visma when they blew the race up at Dwars-Door-Vlaanderen. So if riding the sidewalk is punishable, that punishment right there from Dylan van Baarle, if he'd been thrown out of the race at that moment, would have changed the whole outcome of Dwars-Door-Vlaanderen. So if you're going to call the sidewalk, call it all the time. If you're not going to call it all the time, don't blame Jordi Meeus for riding the sidewalk, or a rider who clearly did not cause the crash, because all the crash was happening in front of him way before he got there, which of course slows the peloton down, which makes the speed of Jordi Meeus look that much more impressive and dangerous when he's on the sidewalk. But he can't predict that the peloton in front of him is going to start crashing. So as they're slowing down, hitting the brakes, he's stuck on the sidewalk, and then of course he goes into the crash of there when we're talking Milano there from UAE Team Emirates, as he bumped into him. But that's because the crash was already happening in front. The peloton was expanding wide. Milano and Jordi Meeus, of course, bumped shoulders, but that is not what caused the crash. So get your tactics right if you're going to blame a rider for crashing a whole peloton. That is not what happened. Okay, hope you guys like my take up here. Hope the riders are paying attention. Get in the brake. Put pressure on UAE Team Emirates at Tour of Flanders, no doubt. Do not push the pace on the climbs. Push it everywhere else so everyone can keep their legs a little bit fresher, especially the domestiques that are in the brake. They can drive it and put more pressure on UAE Team Emirates. And if you're a second star favorite, stay together. If you cannot follow the wheel immediately of Mathieu van der Poel and Tadej Pogačar, stay together, work your super domestiques, and then stay together and hope that Mathieu van der Poel and Tadej Pogačar play some tactical games like we saw at Milan-San Remo. You get back on and we're going to watch a spectacular finish again here, because the classics in 2025 have been nothing less than amazing. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys for the next edition real soon.